Good morning. I call to order the Policy Committee meeting on April 16th. All members of the committee are here. I need an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. 4-0. Next up is an approval of the March 19th open session meetings.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. 4-0. Next up is policies for second review. Mrs. Morris?
Yes, good morning, everyone. The first policy for second review we have is policy 1-13 public hearings. This policy was reviewed by the committee in March and the board in April. There's been no stakeholder input since that time, and staff would request that this policy go for approval at the May meeting. Just a reminder, the revisions in this policy were to address the board portal to sign up for public comments.
We'll do all together. Is that okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
The next one is policy 1-23 public records. This one was also reviewed by the committee in March and the board in April. There's been no stakeholder input since that time, and staff would also request that this go for approval at the May meeting. As a reminder, the revisions to this policy are to address the portal that the board has adopted to request public records.
Okay.
Okay, the next one is policy 3-05A, use of tobacco products. This one was also reviewed by the committee in March and the board in April. There's been no stakeholder input, and staff would request that this go for approval at the May meeting. The revisions to this policy were to address the increased use of vapes, et cetera, at the schools. Okay, and then the last two, policy 418, do not resuscitate, and the proposed new policy, do not resuscitate for employees. I'm going to put those together since they're companion policies. These were reviewed by the committee in March and the board in April, and staff would ask that they go for approval in May. There's been no stakeholder input, and the revisions in this policy were to address requests from staff to ensure that there is an understanding that DNR, the policy regarding DNRs, is not just applicable to students, but it's applicable to employees as well. That's all of the policies for second review.
And I have a motion to send it to the board meeting on May 7th.
Motion to send to the full board for a final approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. 4-0. Next up is policies for first review. Mrs. Morris.
Okay, the first one is policy 2-17, ethics and the purchasing function. The revision to this policy are at the bottom of page 2, and they're to address a training requirement that was adopted in state law that requires folks who deal with contracts, administering and making them, go through an ethics training, and staff recommends that this go to first review at the May meeting.
Any questions?
No, ma'am.
Should we wait till the end?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Next, policy 2-22.
Yep, purchasing requirements for equipment, materials, and supplies. The revisions to this policy are on page 2 under competitive group purchasing, and under page 4, purchases of information technology goods and services, and they're to address statutory changes. And staff would recommend that this go for first review at the May meeting.
Any questions?
No.
Nope. Okay. Next is policy 4-03 AG.
Yes, this is the administrative guidelines for the Code of Student Conduct. The Code of Student Conduct is revised every 2 years, and this is its cycle. State law changed since the last review and required input from a variety of stakeholders. So we have engaged in that process. One of them is consulting with local law enforcement, and Mr. McGraw and I met with the chiefs of all the and the sheriff representatives for all of the different municipalities. We consulted with the principals, who then brought this to their site-based team so that we could engage parents, teachers, and administrators. And the substantive revisions to this I'm going to go through those. One is the addition of social restrictions for both district and school level code violations. A social restriction might be, if you get suspended, you can't go on a field trip, or, those types of not curricular related activities, but dances, parking spaces, maybe those kinds of, things that don't involve the instructional program. We remove the distinction for long-term or short-term suspensions on the condensed academic term. State law defines a short-term suspension to up to and including 10 days. Back before I came to the district, we had defined it in the high school when you have a block schedule or a condensed academic term to 6 days. That has become a problem in being able to get hearings before the board or manifestation determinations done. And then we also had DPI in a state complaint allege that that was a potential violation. So we are recommending that we remove that distinction and that a short-term suspension be consistent with state law at all levels and be up to and including 10 days. Another substantive change is under the tobacco products rule. We separated use and sell and distribute of vapes. So it's now two different violations. Under the current code of conduct, use, sell, and distribute were all one rule violation. And so we changed that so we could deal with the penalties since sell and distribute is a higher penalty than use.
Right.
Another substantive change is under the misrepresentation rule. We defined cheating more clearly and included AI use to address the influx of use of artificial intelligence in academics. The last substantive change is under terror and the bomb threats rule. And this is to include bomb threats that a student makes the bomb threat from school or at a school activity, but it's towards another location. For example, if we were on the field trip in DC and they made a bomb threat towards the Capitol, our current policy only talks about bomb threats towards school property. But now we're including those which happen while you're at school or in a school activity towards another location.
Okay.
So those are substantive changes, and staff would recommend that this go for review at the May meeting to the board.
I like the changes.
Yeah, me too.
Yes.
I agree. I represent the social restrictions.
Yes.
That was me in high school.
Okay. Next up, any other questions before I go on? No? Okay.
Yep.
Policy 4-8.
Yeah, child abuse and related threat to children. The revisions on this policy are on page 3 under the duty to report to the state superintendent. They're used to address statutory and policy changes at the state level. And staff would ask that this go to the board for first review at the May meeting.
Okay. Any questions?
Is this to comply with statute changes to report to the Board of Education instead of DPI?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Any else?
I mean,
Okay. Next
Okay,
up.
the next one is 5-04, extracurricular activities and interscholastic athletics. The revisions are on page 1 under extracurricular activity requirements. We have had attendance requirement in our policy. The state initially had it, NCHSAA removed it. The board felt it was important to keep that expectation, but now the state is now re-implementing that. And so we are recommending the change in the language to say that it's not a local expectation, but it's now a state expectation again. And so we are making that recommendation to address that change in statute or policy. And then staff would recommend that this go to the board for first review at the May meeting.
Any questions?
The only thing we're waiting for on this is a determination of whether excused or unexcused are applicable or whether it's both. But it
Okay.
is an attendance requirement. We're just reminding folks that it's a state requirement.
Yeah.
Not a
But
board.
do we still retain the what qualifies as the attendance requirement, i.e. the number of days missed or percentage or what have you? It's just
The-
there has to be something.
Yes, the threshold that the state is proposing is the same threshold that we've been using.
Okay.
And it was the same threshold that they used before. I think it's 85%.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So the state's getting it in line with us, basically.
Again.
No surprise there.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Okay, next up is policy 804.
Yes, and this is operation of school nutrition services. The revisions to this policy are on the bottom of page 2, and I just uploaded a different version because I found a typo at the end of the first sentence that I needed to fix. And so I removed the 22, which was a footnote that I initially had. And so this is to address statutory changes, and staff recommends that this go to the board for first review at the May meeting.
That's a statutory
Yeah, fails to read.
if you're not
So who's going to keep?
unpaid charges, yep.
Okay, so I'm looking at the changes. Who's going to keep track of if the child fails to have meal money because they have an account. And so
Correct,
they
and
don't,
we track that now.
okay, so we're basically going to track if they get too far in the hole, because if the account is in deficit, the student account, we don't turn them away from having lunch, right?
Now they just keep
It just
keep
keeps
accruing
piling.
a deficit.
Okay. And so this doesn't really define what regularly fails to provide meal money means. So what is our policy as far as, I mean, as soon as it hits deficit, I'm assuming the parents are notified. Is there a continual notification, or how exactly are we going to implement?
Yeah, we already do all this. We track it.
We
We
do.
provide parents
Yep.
notification on a regular basis of the amount owed. The only changes are that the addition of may consider this to be neglect. This is something that that Department of Social Services has turned away whenever you talk about educational neglect. And this is one that the state is now saying that DSS should be considering. And then it also prevents us from withholding
Right.
social restrictions, et cetera, from a student who is in debt, because obviously it's an expectation that we not punish a child for apparent behavior.
Have we ever withheld a diploma because of a deficit?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'm sure that other districts do.
So this is a statutory change as well.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, all right, principal shall not impose penalties. Okay, I see.
Okay. Any other
Thank you.
questions? No. Okay. Okay, I need a motion to send the policy for first review to the board.
Motion to send policy 217, 222, 403 AG, 408, and 504, and 804 to the full board for first consideration.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Our next meeting is May 21st at 8 o'clock via Zoom. I need a motion to.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks. Have a good day.
Have a
Thank
good
you all.
day.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care.